Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the fourth webinar of webinar series hosted by Faculty of Dental Sciences, University of Peradeniya. I am Prasangi Piris, a lecturer in oral medicine and radiology. The webinar today is on oral pigmentation, which is a very vast subject area. However, the speaker today will give an overview of oral pigmentation with a special focus on mucosal pigmentation. Without taking much time, let me introduce the speaker, Dr. Kalani Hettiarachchi. She graduated in 2009 from the Faculty of Dental Sciences, University of Peradeniya, and obtained the MD in Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery in 2016 from Postgraduate Institute of Medicine, University of Columbia. She is serving as a senior lecturer attached to the Oral Medicine and Radiology Division, Faculty of Dental Sciences, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. Dr. Hettiarachchi has presented and published many papers at both local and international conferences and journals in the area of oral medicine and radiology. Let's move on to the presentation by our young consultant, Dr. Kalani Hettiarachchi. Over to you, madam.
Right. Thank you, Prasangi. Thank you for that kind words of introduction. So, can you all see the screen now? Okay.
You can see the presentation.
Right, okay. So thank you very much and good evening, everyone. So as dental professionals, we encounter patients who complain about pigmentation in our day-to-day practice. Yet, I feel that it is not very much discussed. Therefore, sometimes we may get the question as whether this pigmentation is normal, benign, pathological, or even malignant, whether to do a biopsy or not. Therefore, for the next few minutes, I will be talking about mucosal pigmentation. The word pigment is derived from a Latin word meaning color. Therefore, pigmented lesions represent a wide variety of entities ranging from physiologic changes to manifestations of systemic diseases and malignant neoplasms which may be potentially life-threatening. Now, if we look at this diagram, it shows it's a very basic classification of oral pigmentation. And the color changes in the pigmented lesions can be blue, brown, or even black in color. And these color changes are there because of the deposition of either endogenous or exogenous pigmentation. And many of these pigments are either biochemical substances or metabolic products. And only a few will get deposited in the oral soft tissues, while others will get accumulated in the dental hard tissues. But today I will be talking mainly on the oral mucosal pigmentations. Now, when I was going through the literature, I was trying to find a good classification to classify the pigmented lesions. However, I came across a large number of different classifications, but I selected this one particularly because it was very descriptive yet simple and less complicated. So here you can see that there are two arms, the endogenous and the exogenous. And under endogenous pigmentation, you have three different types. The melanin pigmentation is there, hemoglobin and hemosiderin. And also under the melanin pigmentation, you have the physiological and pathological pigmentation. So if we move on to the endogenous pigmentations, now endogenous pigmentation has three categories under that: the hemoglobin, hemosiderin, and melanin. And all these are produced by the body's own metabolism. Now, if we take hemoglobin, it gives rise to a red or blue color pigmentation. And these pigments are mainly associated with the vascular lesions. If we first look at hemangiomas, these will proliferate as endothelial cells of vascular channels and resulting in tumor-like hematomas. And these are especially prominent in children. And the common sites of involvement will be tongue, lips, buccal mucosa, gingiva, and the palate. However, 85% of these lesions will regress spontaneously after puberty, and the color will depend on the depth of the vascular proliferation. Now, if you look at this picture, as you can see, the most oral hemangiomas presenting on the tongue are multinodular in nature and bluish-red in color. And these will frequently extend deep down into the intrinsic muscles of the tongue. Another common site is the labial mucosa. And the lesions will usually be well localized, blue and raised. I'm sorry about the picture quality, it's not very clear, but I think you can see the lesion that is present. Then another important aspect is the port wine stains on the facial skin. This is again another type of hemangiomas that may be present. And usually it has got the name because of the magenta color that is unique to this type of hemangiomas. And then there are sometimes there can be concurrent history of seizures together with the vascular lesion. Then we call it the Sturge-Weber syndrome. This is clinically significant because sometimes you might get the involvement of the eye, and glaucoma might be present with these lesions. Then at the same time, if you look at these skull radiographs, I think you can see that there are vessel wall calcifications which give rise to the tram line calcifications on the skull radiographs. The white arrows will show you the tram lines. The next type is the varices or the varicocytes. These are pathologic focal dilatations of veins or venules, and they will become progressively prominent with the age due to the degenerative changes in the adventitia of venous wall. And these lingual varices usually has a very tortuous or serpentine nature with a blue-red color asymptomatic elevations. And these are the most popular site is the ventral surface of the tongue, as you can see in the second picture here. You can see the involvement of the ventral surface of the tongue. And these varices usually resembles hemangiomas clinically as well as histologically. And there are two key features that will enable us to differentiate one from the other. The first one is the age at onset. So if we consider hemangiomas, they are usually congenital and has a tendency to regress spontaneously. Whereas the varices, they arise in older individuals, and once formed, they will usually not regress. The second one is the etiology. Now, varix has a finite growth potential. Once formed, further enlargement is uncommon. Whereas the hemangiomas and vascular hamatomas, hemangiomas are vascular hamatomas. So they have the potential of growth, especially during until the puberty. And varix will represent a venous dilatation and may evolve from trauma such as lip or cheek biting. Now, another important aspect is Kaposi sarcomas. And these are malignant vascular neoplasms, most commonly seen in patients with immune suppressions due to HIV infections, organ transplantation like causes. At the initial stage, it will appear as a flat or slightly elevated blue or purple color plaque on the skin or the oral mucosa. And these lesions may develop into compressible soft tissue enlargements that sometimes blanches on pressure. And the oral lesions occur most commonly on the hard palate and the gingiva. Also, Kaposi sarcomas are slow progressive neoplasms and doesn't show a great tendency for metastasis. And the differentials at early stages may include the pyogenic granulomas and giant cell granuloma. The treatment for these lesions usually include systemic or intralesional chemotherapy and surgical excision. However, since these patients are immunocompromised, the prognosis depends on the systemic health of the patient. Now, the last of the hemoglobin type is the hereditary hemorrhagic telangiectasia. This is a genetically transmitted disease and inherited as an autosomal dominant trait. it represents multiple microaneurysms due to weakening defect in the adventitial coat of venules. And this is also characterized by multiple round or oval papules measuring less than 0.5 centimeters. And they will be red or brown in color. And these lesions are rather very pathognomonic. However, we have to exclude the possibility of diseases which can be associated with platelet defects. Therefore, we have to do investigations to rule out these, and if the diagnosis is confirmed, then no further treatment is necessary. Then moving to the hemosiderin type of lesions, there are mainly three types: petechiasis, ecchymosis, and hemochromatosis. Now, as you can see in this picture, petechiasis are submucous minute pinpoint hemorrhages. And these are usually caused by trauma, viral infections, or even associated with bleeding problems. And any mucosal site can get affected, but usually these are more commonly seen on the soft palate. Ecchymosis, on the other hand, is commonly known as bruises, and they will occur as a result of trauma, following trauma. Then, if we move on to the physiological pigmentation, the melanoplakia. Now, this comes under the melanin type of pigmentations. Under that, if you can remember, we have two arms, the physiological pigmentation as well as the pathological pigmentation. Now, if we consider physiological pigmentation, this is more common in dark-skinned people, especially in Africa, Asia-like populations. And this increase in pigmentation is mainly due to increase in the melanocyte activity and not due to great number of melanocytes. Now, melanin pigmentation increase can happen with two mechanisms. One is the melanocyte population might increase, such as in melanomas. And the other type is where the activity of the melanocytes will increase. So in physiologic pigmentation, you will mainly see that there is increase in the activity and there is no increase in the number of melanocytes. And usually, as we all know, the attached gingiva is the most common site to get affected. And however, it can be noted anywhere in the oral cavity. And this is mainly a diagnosis, this is mainly a clinical diagnosis. And as you can see in this picture, you can see the involvement of the attached gingiva. And usually it warrants treatment if the patient is worried about the aesthetics. Now, these are the other oral sites that can get affected. You can see the physiological pigmentation on the palate, on the labial mucosa, as well as on the buccal mucosa. Then second, or the pathological type of diseases, first is the post-inflammatory pigmentation. Now, this occurs with long-standing inflammatory mucosal diseases, especially with diseases like oral lichen planus. And the pathogenesis is not very clear, but it is more frequently seen with dark-skinned individuals. And clinically, they will appear as multiple brown-black pigmented macular areas adjacent to the reticular erosive or vesicular lesions, as seen in this picture. The next is smoker's melanosis. This occurs in about 30% of the tobacco users, and it is characterized by discrete or coalescing multiple brown macules that usually involve the attached mandibular gingiva. So again, as in physiological pigmentation, you will see an increase in the melanin production. And the melanin gets deposited within the basal cell layer and the lamina propria. Usually it will return to normal over several months to years following cessation of the habit. Okay. Now, moving on to the cutaneous freckle or ephilis, which is very common lesion among the white-skinned people. These are asymptomatic, small, well-circumscribed, tan or brown-colored macules that is often seen in the sun-exposed region of the facial or perioral skin. Now, if you might be wondering why I showed the previous slide. That is because of the oral melanotic macule. Now, there is controversy between the oral melanotic macule is the oral counterpart of the freckle, because this clinically resembles more like the freckle. However, there is two schools of thought. Some people think that there is no dermal counterpart for melanotic macula. And these lesions are brown or black in pigment and usually less than 1 centimeter. But sometimes these macular lesions may enlarge even up to few centimeters. They are usually asymptomatic, flat and not thickened, and appear similar to the freckles of the skin. And there will be focal pigmented lesions without an increase in the number of melanocytes. So you can see that majority of these lesions does not have increase in the number of melanocytes. It's mainly the pigmentation that is being increased. And the common sites of involvement are lower lip, gingiva, buccal mucosa, and the palate. The significance is like you have to distinguish this from a nevus or early melanoma. And there is no need for further treatment if you confirm the diagnosis. And biopsy should be performed if there is any doubt. So here I have shown some pictures of the melanotic macule, one on the palate and the other one on the labial gingiva. The oral melanotic nevi. This is a benign proliferation of nevus cells, which are derived from the neural crest cells. And there are mainly two types, nevocellular nevus and blue nevus. Clinically, oral nevi are small, well circumscribed macules, but commonly appear as slightly raised papules. And they occur most commonly in the gingiva and the hard palate. And also when I say nevocellular nevus and blue nevus, mind you, both these will have the brown color when it comes to the oral cavity. You will not see a blue color as depicted by the name blue nevus. And nevi of oral mucosa should be completely excised because they cannot be differentiated from melanoma based on the clinical features. If we look at the morphogenesis, now this diagram shows the morphogenesis of the melanocytic proliferation. And accordingly, we have three different types, junctional nevus, compound nevus, and the intradermal or intramucosal nevus. Now, in the first junctional nevus, the benign neoplastic melanocytes are proliferated along the submucosal or mucosal junction. So you can see here, it is between the submucosal and the mucosal junction. When it comes to the compound nevus, there is migration of proliferated melanocytes into the underlying mesenchymal tissue. So you can see that now it is extending to the underlying connective tissue. And in the intradermal or the intramucosal type, there is complete loss of the junctional component. Now there is no attachment to the junctional area and it is completely remaining in the subepithelial connective tissue stroma, giving rise to the intramucosal lesions. And at the same time, I think you can notice how the top or the presentation in the oral cavity. When it is junctional nevus, it's very darkly present, as well as when it goes to the intramucosal area, you can only see a very light brown or flesh colored lesion on the oral cavity. Then the blue nevus. So as I told you earlier, it is brown in color, and the intraoral variant is typically identified between the 3rd and the 5th decade of life. And females have a preponderance for getting these blue nevus. And once they reach a given size, their growth will cease and remain static. And usually biopsy is necessary for diagnostic confirmation since the clinical diagnosis includes many other focal pigmentations, such as melanotic macule, melanoma, and amalgam tattoo. So we need to differentiate this from the other malignant processes like melanoma. Therefore, we need to do a biopsy. Now coming to oral melanoma. And this is a neoplastic lesion. So oral melanomas are rare, accounting for less than 1% of the oral malignancies. And these lesions begin as asymptomatic, slow-growing brown or black patches with asymmetric or irregular borders. So that is very important, where you get the asymmetry and the irregular borders with the oral melanoma. Or it has a rapidly enlarging mass associated with ulceration, bleeding, pain, and bone destruction. So these are the important clinical features that you can see with regard to malignant melanomas. And the most common site of involvement is the hard palate, which will account for about 40% of the cases, followed by gingiva. And oral melanoma generally occurs in 4th and 7th decades of life with a male preponderance. Now I have shown you two different melanomas, the first one on the hard palate and the other one involving the anterior labial mucosa, which is not a very common site, but sometimes we might see these lesions. Then in approximately about 1/3 of the cases, there are two growth patterns. One is very laterally and superficially spreading, whereas in this other type, there is vertical growth phase. When you have the vertical growth phase, you get a nodular appearance at the same time. And usually distant metastasis can happen at the lungs, brain, or liver like areas. The treatment would be then excision with a wide margin is the treatment of choice. And once the nodularity has evolved, the lesions has probably metastasized. So nodularity, the presence of nodularity means that there is vertical growth phase has started. And the prognosis of these patients is much worse than the cutaneous counterpart. And the overall 5-year survival rate is about 15%. Okay. So, Dr. Prasangi, can you help me with this? Can you please show the first?
Okay, ma'am. I'm going to launch the first poll. The poll is on. Shall we end the poll, madam?
Yeah, about a few minutes.
Now I'm sharing the results.
Okay, so the majority has gone for 10% has gone for a melanoma, majority for varix, and 18% for hemangiomas. Right. So the correct answer is the second one, because if you consider the patient's age as well as a site, the lingual varices is the most prevalent answer out of the given ones. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yes, ma'am. I'm launching the second poll.
Sorry, wait, there is, I can't go to the other slide. Can you please?
Okay, I'm going to end poll. Can you move to the next slide, ma'am?
There is some technical hitch. Give me a second. Right.
Okay, I'm launching the second poll. I'm ending the poll now. This is the share, results.
Again, we have 13% for physiological pigmentation, 6% saying it's an amalgam tattoo, and 80% or the majority is saying that it's a malignant melanoma. Okay, yes. So I agree with the malignant melanoma, because if you look at this lesion, it's a quite big or large lesion, and it has asymmetry present, different color variations are there, and for malignant melanomas, the palate is the most common site. So you need to do a biopsy in this case, and especially if you are in doubt. Okay. Yes, Prasangi, third one, please.
I'm launching the third poll. I'm ending the poll now, madam. And this is the result.
Very good. So the majority is in agreement now. So the majority says it's melanotic macule, which is the correct answer. Right. The next one, please, Prasangi.
I'm launching the fourth poll. Okay, I'm ending the poll. And you can see the results, madam.
So I'm wondering why still, okay, that's fair enough. So physiological pigmentation, yes, you can see the attached gingiva, involvement of the attached gingiva, and this is a dark-skinned person. And also not only the attached gingiva, but you might see some pigmentation in other areas, which I showed you in the palate, labial mucosa, or even on the buccal mucosa. So this is a case where this is a physiological pigmentation. The last one, Prasangi, yes.
Yes. I'm launching the fifth poll. Okay, I'm ending the poll now. And you can see the results, madam.
Yes. So more pictures that you see, the results get better. So it's a melanotic macula, I agree with that. Okay, so that was a small brainstorming exercise, and we will move on with the presentation now. So we have completed the endogenous type of pigmentation, and now we are moving on to the exogenous pigmentation. Now, usually the amalgam tattoo, as we all know, these can present as a consequence of iatrogenic event. And clinically, they will present as either a solitary or a focal pigmentation. And these macular bluish gray or even black color lesions are seen on the buccal mucosa, gingiva, or even on the palate. Now, how are we going to confirm the diagnosis? The only way to do is to take a radiograph, which will indicate a metallic particles if they are large enough to be identified on the radiographs. And normally these lesions will be found in the vicinity of the teeth with the large amalgam restorations. Now, amalgam fragments can get deposited in oral tissues during multiple tooth extractions. And also we might not notice that these metal particles are falling into the extraction socket. And during the healing phase, the amalgam becomes entombed within the connective tissue and reepithelialization takes place. Whereas after some time, you might see the discoloration over the mucosa. And as I told you earlier, the only way to confirm it is to do or take a radiograph and demonstrate the presence of a metal. However, biopsy is recommended in gray pigmented lesions which appear suddenly, especially in lesions which are distant from the restored tooth. So if it is not in the vicinity, better to confirm the diagnosis, and we can do a radiograph first, and if it doesn't show any metal particles, better to go ahead and do a biopsy to confirm the diagnosis. Okay. Then the drug-induced oral pigmentations. Now, drugs we consider as exogenous groups, and then some of these medications may cause pigmentation in the oral mucosa. And usually this is not directly related to the dose of or the duration of the medication. And some will result in diffuse melanosis, while the others will result in well localized lesions. And now here I have listed down the different causative mechanisms. Now if we see, there are 4 different causative mechanisms. Some drugs may cause intraoral inflammatory reactions and subsequently induce the post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation in predisposed patients. And also there can be direct deposition of pigmented drug particles or drug metabolites, such as in minocyclines, which gets deposited in the mucosa after directly reacting with the melanin to form a drug pigment complex. And the third mechanism is where the medications like antimalarial drugs, they will get systemically absorbed and then produce a diffuse bluish gray-like discoloration, especially on the hard palate or the gingivas. And there are certain medications which have arsenic in them, which will increase the synthesis of melanin. Then the graphite tattoos, usually this occurs mainly on the palate and represent a traumatic implantation from a lead pencil. And this is especially prevalent in small children. Then black hairy tongue. So this is a relatively common condition of unknown etiology caused by defective desquamation and reactive hypertrophy of the filiform papillae of the tongue. And these mainly involve the dorsum of the tongue, especially the middle and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. You get the hairy appearance because of the elongation of the keratinized filiform papillae. And when you get the entrapment of different extrinsic factors, you get the blackish or various color changes. And there are certain precipitating factors like poor oral hygiene, certain medications, broad spectrum antibiotics, and even radiation therapy. A biopsy is usually not necessary for diagnosis due to the typical clinical presentation. So if you look at this picture, it is very typical and pathognomonic. You will not forget it in your lifetime if you have seen one case. And especially the way of or the treatment would be scraping or brushing of the tongue and cessation of smoking if they have the habit, and to avoid the tea and coffee for a few weeks to enhance the resolution of the black hairy tongue. Then another important entity, the HIV oral melanosis. Now since the AIDS is getting more and more popularized, so human immunodeficiency virus infections has been associated with multiple well circumscribed melanotic macules, which are localized mainly on the buccal and the palatal mucosa. However, it remains unclear how these pigments occur. Are they caused by the virus, therapy, or other factors? So research is being done on these aspects to establish how these pigments are caused by. Then another exogenous type, the heavy metal pigmentation. You will get a diffuse oral pigmentation, which is associated with ingestion of heavy metals like lead, mercury, bismuth, and arsenic, especially if the patient ingests these for a long period of time, especially in industrial workers. Then another important aspect to note is that sometimes these pigmented lesions can be associated with certain syndromes. So it might not only be the localized lesion that you are looking at, but there is a generalized systemic involvement for that lesion. So here I have listed down generalized pigmentation can happen with Addison's disease, Nelson's, and the Albright syndrome, and localized pigmentation mainly with Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. However, when we are considering treating these patients, it is not necessary to treat the pigmented lesions. They will automatically disappear following the treatment of the underlying medical problem. So that therefore it is important to identify when there is the presence of an underlying systemic pathology. So I will quickly touch upon two of these diseases, systemic diseases, which are common. And these are the Addison's. The first one is the Addison's disease. Now, which will result in an upsurge of the ACTH hormone. And it will result in appearance of dark pigmented lesions of the skin and oral mucosa with associated other signs and symptoms. Now, these are the other signs and symptoms that you might notice: anorexia, nausea, and postural hypertension. So always when you're taking the history and doing your examination in these patients, it is important to assess these aspects in these patients. So the next one is the Peutz-Jeghers syndrome. It is an autosomal dominant disease giving rise to macules, interstitial hematomatous polyposis, and increased risk of carcinomas, mainly in the gastrointestinal tract. And usually the oral pigmentation is very pathognomonic. And it is very important to identify these patients because of the potential malignancies that they are involved with. So here in this slide, I have shown two pictures. So you can see the multiple focal melanotic brown macules, which are very tiny, less than 0.5 centimeters in size, which are concentrated around the lips. And same lesions might appear on the tip of the fingers as well. Not only the lips, but other oral sites like anterior tongue, buccal mucosa, mucosal surfaces, apart from the mucosal surfaces of the lips, other areas also can get affected. So it is important to, when you are examining your patient, to look at the hands and other areas, body areas, to detect whether there are any pigmented lesions present. Now, when we consider the differential diagnosis for a pigmented lesion of the oral cavity, the history is very important in order to arrive at a differential diagnosis. So in the history, when was the onset, the duration of the lesion, and whether the patient is on any medications that can induce this pigmentation, whether the patient is having the habit of smoking, associated skin hyperpigmentations, as I showed you in Peutz-Jeghers syndrome, and the presence of systemic signs and symptoms. So all these are very important, not only the pigment lesion that you are seeing at the oral cavity. Now, we all have this dilemma whether to do a biopsy or not to do a biopsy. So this here I have listed down certain indications when you can consider a biopsy. For flat, non-thickened pigmentations that are changing or having, now the lesion is, if the lesion is changing rapidly during a short period of time, or if they're having atypical colors, borders, irregular borders, or abnormal size, as if you can remember the picture that I showed you. So these are the indications that you can consider of doing a biopsy. And if oral nevus and or melanoma is included in the clinical differential diagnosis, then a biopsy is indicated to rule out the melanoma. And as always, in all the doubtful situations, the favor should be given, and it is always better to perform a biopsy. So I'm coming to the final slide of my presentation. So these are the take-home messages. So many pigmented lesions can be clinically diagnosed. If you go for a proper detailed history and do a proper examination, the majority of the pigmented lesions can be sorted. Therefore, together with the clinical history, the symmetry, uniformity of the lesion are crucial in determining the clinical differential diagnosis. Anyway, if the underlying cause of the pigmentation cannot be readily identified, a tissue biopsy is essential for definitive diagnosis. Because arriving at a proper diagnosis is very important for the clinician in order to plan the appropriate treatment for the patient. So with that, I'll be concluding my presentation, and thank you very much for your kind listening.
Thank you very much, madam, for your very informative and illustrative presentation. And we have one question from our colleague Shandir Gunasena. I'm going to state that excellent presentation, madam. In the case in which you had shown a large melanoma in the hard palate, what is the best location in the lesion to obtain a biopsy?
Now, yes, as we know, you should be avoiding the ulcerated areas, the principles of taking a biopsy. And if the lesion is very large, you can even go for a multiple biopsies if you're not very sure, but usually you have to avoid the ulcerated areas.
And also we have few more questions. One question from an anonymous attendee. Can physiological pigmentation occur later in life, or should it always be present from birth?
Well, yes, it might occur because sometimes the patient might notice it at a later stage. So then only they will consider it. So usually it is present since birth, but the severity might get incremented at a later stage.
Also, we have another question from Dr. Duan Rajpaksha. Madam, thank you for the excellent presentation. Please shed some light on management of hemangioma.
Yes. Now, when it comes to the management of hemangiomas, you have, as I told you earlier, 85% of them will resolve spontaneously once the patient achieve or come to the puberty. And the others we can go, there are different modes. We can go for injection of the sclerotic agents. And there are even surgical methods of treating these. So these are the, you have to discuss with the patient, and if it is going to persist only, you have to, because until the patient comes to the puberty, you can keep it under observation.
Okay, the last question from Dr. Gayatri. She's asking, how can the head and neck radiation cause hairy tongue?
Because it can lead to, now head and neck radiation, it's not directly affected. It will lead to dry mouth as well as the poor oral hygiene. And with that, it will lead to the black hairy tongue. It's not the direct, they will predispose these patients to developing the black hairy tongue, head and neck radiation.
Okay, thank you very much, madam. And I would like to thank all of you for connecting with us today. And before winding up, I would like to invite you all for the next webinar on oral submucous fibrosis by Professor Ruan Jayasinghe, and we will post the link for registration tonight. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.